Amanda Harris adjusted her navy blazer carefully, taking a slow, deep breath before stepping into the sleek glass elevator of the Sterling and Fisher legal firm, the most prestigious law firm in downtown Manhattan. At 28, Amanda had graduated from Columbia Law School at the top of her class, with glowing recommendations and a remarkable internship under her belt. She felt ready. The elevator doors opened silently onto a floor of polished marble and minimalistic elegance. Amanda walked confidently to the receptionist, who greeted her politely and guided her to a conference room. Large windows overlooked the bustling New York streets below, creating an impression of power and control. A few moments later, Adrian Fisher entered. At 35, Adrian exuded confidence and authority. His tailored charcoal gray suit fit perfectly, and his sharp blue eyes immediately appraised Amanda as he shook her hand. They exchanged pleasantries before Adrian sat down, leaning back casually. "Amanda, your credentials are impressive," Adrian said, scanning her resume briefly, almost as an afterthought. "Top of your class, strong recommendations. You've clearly worked hard." "Thank you," Amanda replied calmly, meeting his gaze steadily. "But here's the thing," Adrian continued, shifting slightly. "At Sterling and Fisher, we prioritize a certain image. We represent high-profile clients who expect a specific style." Amanda's stomach tightened. She already sensed where this was headed but maintained her composure. "I'm not sure I understand," she responded carefully, although she did. Adrian's smile tightened, his fingers tapping gently on the table. "Your talent isn't in question, Ms. Harris. It's just that your profile doesn't quite align with what our clientele is accustomed to." Amanda felt the sting of his words. She'd anticipated subtle bias, but hearing it so openly was worse than she'd imagined. "I see," Amanda said softly, standing slowly and maintaining her dignity. "Thank you for your time." Adrian rose as well, offering another tight, perfunctory handshake. "Good luck," he said, clearly dismissing her. Walking out, Amanda felt the weight of rejection heavy on her shoulders, but underneath it stirred something stronger: determination. By the time she reached the street, her disappointment had already transformed into resolve. If Sterling and Fisher wouldn't accept her, she'd build her own path. Amanda Harris sat in her small office, staring at the blank walls that would soon be adorned with certificates, accolades, and the symbol of her new beginning. It wasn't much, a modest office on the second floor of an old brownstone building in the heart of the city. The desk was a simple wooden structure, the chair behind it a bit too large for her slender frame. Still, it felt like home. It felt like the first step in the right direction. When she left Sterling and Fisher, she didn't know exactly how she was going to move forward. But she knew that she couldn't stay in that world of polite discrimination and closed doors. Opening her own practice, though small and risky, felt like the only viable choice. She would fight for those who didn't have a voice, for those who were overlooked or judged for things beyond their control. The phone on her desk buzzed, snapping her from her thoughts. She reached out and picked up the receiver. "Hello, this is Amanda Harris Law. How can I help you?" A voice on the other end was hesitant but desperate. "Is this the lawyer who just started her practice?" "Yes, this is Amanda Harris. How can I help?" "My name is Jason Clark. I own a small coffee shop in the city and, well, I don't know who else to turn to. I'm being harassed by the city council. They're trying to shut me down because of zoning violations, but I'm being treated unfairly. I'm not doing anything wrong, I swear." Amanda paused. Harassment, zoning violations. It sounded like a case she could handle, something that, if nothing else, would get her feet wet. She hadn't expected her first case to come through so quickly, but here it was. She couldn't afford to turn it down. "I'd be happy to help, Mr. Clark. Why don't you come down to my office? We can go over the details." A few hours later, Jason arrived at the office. He was a wiry man in his early 40s, with messy dark hair and a look of stress etched into his face. His coffee-stained apron and worn-out jeans spoke of someone who had been working hard to keep his business afloat. He sat across from Amanda's desk, his hands clasped tightly in front of him as if to keep them from trembling. "Thank you for seeing me," Jason said, his voice thick with frustration. "I don't know what I'm going to do. They've been trying to close me down for months now, even though I've got all the permits. It's like they're just looking for a reason to shut me down." Amanda nodded, pulling a notepad closer. "Tell me everything. What's been happening?" Jason explained how the city council had begun scrutinizing his shop, accusing him of violating zoning laws despite having the necessary permits and licenses. He had hired an attorney, but they had done little more than send letters of protest. After months of back and forth, The city council now insisted that his coffee shop was in violation of local zoning codes, a claim that Jason felt was nothing more than a fabricated excuse to push him out of the neighborhood. They're saying the area's zoned for residential use, not commercial, and they want to tear down my shop. But that's not true. I've done everything by the book. Jason's voice cracked with emotion. They're trying to run me out of business because they don't like me being here. Amanda listened carefully, making notes. It was clear that Jason was a victim of some sort of legal bullying. But more than that, it seemed like the city was using their power to push him out for reasons that had nothing to do with zoning laws and everything to do with making room for wealthier developers. This wasn't about zoning at all. I think I can help you, Mr. Clark, Amanda said after a long pause. But we need to go beyond just the zoning laws. We need to expose what's really happening here. It's not just about what's written in the paperwork. It's about the power dynamics at play, and we need to show that. Jason's eyes widened in disbelief. How are we supposed to do that? Amanda stood up, walking over to the whiteboard where she began mapping out a strategy. She knew this was going to take some work, but the more she thought about it, the more she felt certain that Jason's case could be the perfect foundation for her practice, a real David and Goliath story. And she knew she had the skills to fight it. First, we'll go through the zoning laws. If we find any inconsistencies, we'll challenge them. But we're also going to look into the city's relationship with developers and the real estate market. I think the city's being pressured by bigger interests, and we can use that against them. We'll need a good public relations push, too. I'll reach out to some contacts in the media and see if we can get a journalist interested. Jason's shoulders seemed to relax a little. I don't know if I can afford all this. Amanda smiled, the first genuine smile she'd allowed herself in a long time. You don't have to worry about that. We'll figure it out. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Amanda spent countless hours combing through legal documents, talking to the media, and coordinating with Jason. She spoke to zoning experts, interviewed other small business owners who had been pushed out of their neighborhoods, and dug deep into the city's development plans. It didn't take long before she uncovered some unsettling connections. Major developers with ties to local politicians had been pressuring the city to redevelop the area for luxury apartments. Amanda knew she had a solid case. More than that, she knew that she had a story that could draw the public's attention and give Jason the platform he needed to fight back. When the article by local journalist Laura Kingston was published in the New York Post, it quickly went viral. The headline read, "Small business owner fights back against city council's corruption and illegal zoning claims." It wasn't long before the city council, facing public outcry, backed down. The zoning charges were dropped, and Jason's coffee shop was allowed to stay open. Amanda sat at her desk late one evening, the sound of her fingers tapping rhythmically on the keyboard. She had just finished drafting another press release, one that would be sent out to media outlets the following morning. The victory for Jason Clark had made waves, but it was only the beginning. She could feel the shift. People were starting to take notice of her. She had begun to build a reputation, not just as a young lawyer, but as someone who could stand up to powerful forces when it mattered. Jason's case was her first big win, and it wasn't just about saving a small business. It was about challenging a system that often favored the rich and powerful. Amanda had seen firsthand how easily the city's elite could crush those beneath them. But now, she had proven that someone could fight back. The phone on her desk buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. She picked up the receiver. Amanda Harris. "Amanda," came the voice on the other end, rough with age and experience. "It's Robert Sanders." Amanda straightened in her chair at the sound of his voice. Robert Sanders was a legendary figure in the legal world, a former mentor and a longtime friend of her late father. He was one of the few people who had always believed in her, even when she doubted herself. Though his practice was small and mostly focused on corporate law, his reputation had earned him the respect of judges and politicians alike. "What's going on, Robert?" Amanda asked. "I've been following your work, Amanda," Robert said, his voice sounding both approving and serious. "You've made quite an impact with the Clark case, but there's something bigger coming your way. You need to brace yourself." Amanda's mind raced. "What do you mean?" "Have you heard of the Brown Enterprises case?" Robert asked. "The company led by Michael Brown?" Amanda leaned back in her chair, thinking. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Michael Brown was a high-profile businessman known for his large retail chains, but he was also a controversial figure. His company was infamous for aggressive business practices, exploiting workers, and having a reputation for being ruthless with anyone who crossed them. "I've heard of them. Why?" Amanda asked cautiously. Well, there's a situation brewing, Robert continued. A former employee, Ashley Thompson, came to me last week. She's been a part of their HR department for years, and she says she has evidence of major wrongdoing, discrimination, wage theft, harassment, the kind of stuff that could bring the company down. But no one is willing to take it on. No one except you, perhaps. Amanda's heart began to race. This was it. The kind of case that could take her practice to the next level. But it was also dangerous. Taking on a giant like Michael Brown would be risky. His reputation was already formidable, and he had deep connections within the political and corporate spheres. But Amanda's mind was already made up. "I'll take the case," Amanda said, her voice firm. A few days later, Amanda met with Ashley Thompson. The young woman was in her mid-20s, with dark circles under her eyes and an air of quiet desperation. She sat across from Amanda, her hands nervously ringing in her lap. "Amanda, thank you for meeting with me," Ashley said, her voice shaky. "I don't know what to do anymore. I've worked at Brown Enterprises for nearly 5 years, and I've seen things I can't ignore anymore. They don't care about their employees. They exploit us, they humiliate us, and they target certain people. It's been going on for years, and no one listens. I can't stay silent anymore." Amanda nodded, her mind already racing with the possibilities. "Tell me everything. What exactly have you seen?" Ashley went on to explain how Michael Brown's company had systematically discriminated against certain employees, particularly women and minorities. They were paid less, given fewer opportunities for advancement, and subjected to hostile work environments. Worse still, she claimed that the company had been engaged in wage theft, forcing employees to work overtime without compensation, and retaliating against anyone who dared to speak out. "There's more," Ashley said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have documents, emails, performance reviews, memos from HR. It's all right here." She pulled a thick folder from her bag and slid it across the table to Amanda. The folder was filled with evidence. Emails between high-level managers discussing how to cover up the discrimination, memos outlining the company's efforts to exploit workers, and even confidential performance reviews that clearly showed a pattern of bias. Amanda's pulse quickened as she flipped through the documents. This was more than just a case of corporate malpractice. This was a systemic abuse of power. If Ashley's evidence was legitimate, and Amanda had no reason to doubt it, it could be the breakthrough case she'd been waiting for. Over the next few weeks, Amanda worked tirelessly to build her case against Brown Enterprises. She pored over every document, tracked down other employees willing to speak out, and met with reporters who could help bring the story to light. Her office, once quiet and unassuming, was now a hive of activity. She had enlisted the help of a few trusted colleagues, and together, they built a strategy. But even as the evidence mounted, Amanda knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Michael Brown wasn't going to back down without a fight. He had money, influence, and the kind of power that could crush anyone who stood in his way. One evening, Amanda received an unexpected call from a reporter she'd been working with. "Amanda," the reporter said, his voice filled with urgency, "I've got some big news. Brown Enterprises is making moves to discredit your client. They've got a smear campaign ready to go. They're going to say Ashley is lying, that she's disgruntled and seeking revenge. They'll accuse her of making false claims. You need to prepare for this. They're coming after you." Amanda set the phone down slowly, her mind racing. She had known this would happen, but it still stung. The battle was about to get much harder. She stared out of the window of her office, watching the lights of the city twinkle in the distance. This was her chance. If she could win this case, it would change everything. Not just for her, but for all those who had suffered in silence. It wouldn't be easy, but Amanda was ready. She wasn't going to let Michael Brown or anyone else silence her. This was her fight, and she was going to win. Amanda's office was silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The weight of the case she was handling, the case that could make or break her career, felt heavier with every passing day. As she sifted through the growing pile of evidence against Michael Brown and his company, the realization struck her hard. She was up against a juggernaut, a powerful corporation that would do anything to protect its interests. And yet, despite the enormity of the battle ahead, Amanda could not bring herself to step back. It wasn't just about the legal fight anymore. It was about something deeper, something personal. This was her chance to prove not only that she was capable of winning against the odds, but also that the system could be made to work for those who had been silenced for far too long. She could feel the sting of her earlier rejection by Sterling and Fisher still in the back of her mind, but it no longer consumed her. Now it fueled her. It Amanda was pacing back and forth in her office, her eyes scanning over the case files, when the door swung open and Robert Sanders stepped in. His usually calm demeanor was tinged with an unusual urgency. His face, normally the picture of composure, was tight with concern. "Amanda, we need to talk," Robert said, closing the door behind him. He moved to the desk and sat down without waiting for her to acknowledge him, a rare sign of his unease. "I've been in touch with some people, and I think you need to reconsider how you're going about this." Amanda stopped pacing and fixed him with a sharp look. "Reconsider what, Robert?" "Look, I know this is important to you, but this is a whole different level than what you're used to. You're going up against Michael Brown, a man who's not afraid to use everything at his disposal to destroy anyone who crosses him. And right now, you're playing right into his hands." Amanda clenched her jaw, but her voice was steady. "I'm not afraid of him, Robert. I know the stakes. I know how dangerous this is. But I'm not backing down. I can't. Not now." Robert leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You don't get it, Amanda. This isn't just a matter of winning or losing a case. This is about your life, your reputation, and, if it goes badly, your future in this profession. I've seen too many young lawyers think they could take on the big guys and end up crushed. I don't want that for you." Amanda's heart raced. She knew Robert was looking out for her. He had always been a mentor, someone who had guided her when she doubted herself. But she also knew that she had to trust her instincts. This case was too important. She couldn't let fear, whether her own or Robert's, stop her. "I understand your concern," Amanda said slowly. "But I'm not backing down. Michael Brown and his company have been hurting people for too long. They've used their power to intimidate and silence others, and they think they can do the same to me. I'm not going to let them." Robert exhaled, as though trying to calm himself. "I won't try to change your mind, Amanda, but I want you to be prepared. Brown will come after you, and he'll play dirty. You need to be ready for everything." Amanda nodded, her resolve hardening. "I am ready, and I won't let him get away with this." The following week, the first signs of Michael Brown's offensive began to show. Amanda's office was flooded with phone calls, emails, and even anonymous messages warning her to drop the case. The threats, though veiled, were unmistakable. "We can make your life very difficult," one message read. "You have no idea what you're getting into." But it wasn't the threats that truly shook Amanda. It was the smear campaign that began to surface in the media. At first, it was subtle. A few blog posts here and there, anonymous comments on social media, all suggesting that Ashley Thompson's claims were unfounded. She was portrayed as a disgruntled ex-employee looking to settle scores, her allegations dismissed as baseless. But soon, it escalated. A local news outlet published an article that questioned Ashley's credibility, stating that her story was inconsistent and that there was no evidence to support her accusations. Amanda knew this was only the beginning. She had anticipated this move, but that didn't make it any easier to bear. The media blitz was designed to intimidate and undermine Ashley's credibility. Brown Enterprises was trying to turn the tide of public opinion before the case even went to court. Amanda spent hours meeting with Ashley, reassuring her and preparing her for the oncoming battle. The young woman was struggling to hold it together. The weight of the accusations against a corporation as powerful as Brown Enterprises was beginning to take its toll. But Amanda knew they couldn't back down now. They had too much at stake. "We'll fight this, Ashley," Amanda said, her voice firm but compassionate. "The truth is on our side, and we have the evidence. Don't let them scare you. This is your fight, too." Ashley nodded, though Amanda could see the fear still in her eyes. It wasn't easy, but Ashley was a fighter, just like Amanda. As the media storm raged on, Amanda's strategy was taking shape. She knew the court of public opinion would play a critical role, so she set out to turn the tide in their favor. She contacted journalists who had written favorable stories about small businesses and workers' rights, hoping they could amplify their message. She gave a series of interviews, carefully crafting her public persona as a lawyer willing to take on the corrupt giants of the business world. It worked. Slowly but surely, the narrative began to shift. The public began to question Brown Enterprises, and whispers of corporate malfeasance started to emerge. The more Amanda worked to push the story forward, the more it resonated with ordinary people, those who had been victims of corporate greed and exploitation, those who had been silenced for far too long. But even as Amanda celebrated these small victories, she knew the hardest battle was yet to come. The courtroom loomed ahead, and Michael Brown had the best lawyers money could buy. He had deep pockets and influential allies, and he was willing to do whatever it took to protect his empire. One evening, As Amanda sat in her office, poring over her notes for the case, she received a call from Robert. "Amanda, we have a problem," he said, his voice grim. "I've been hearing whispers. It looks like Brown is planning something big, a last-ditch effort to discredit you before the trial begins. You need to be ready for anything." Amanda's heart sank. She had known this day would come, but it didn't make it any easier to face. Brown Enterprises wasn't going to let her take them down without a fight. The real battle was just beginning. The weight of the case grew heavier with every passing day. Amanda stood in front of her office window, gazing out at the city that had become both her battleground and her inspiration. The skyline stretched endlessly before her, representing the dreams of many, but also the impenetrable power structures that often crushed the hopes of the few. This was her fight, against corruption, against indifference, and against the oppressive forces that held people down. But today, the stakes had been raised even higher. Amanda had just finished a long conference call with Robert Sanders, who had spent the last few days digging into the latest threat from Brown Enterprises. They had been preparing for a legal onslaught, but now it seemed that Brown's tactics were going to extend beyond the courtroom and into the realm of personal attack. "They're moving fast, Amanda," Robert had warned, his voice tight. "I don't have all the details yet, but there are rumors that Michael Brown's people are going to hit you personally. They'll try to ruin your reputation. The smear campaign won't just be about the case anymore. It'll be about you. They'll dig into your past, your family, anything they can find to discredit you." Amanda gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. This was what she had feared all along. The personal attacks. The attempt to tear her down not for her legal skills, but for her very identity. "I'm not going to let them scare me," Amanda had replied firmly, though the unease in her voice betrayed her. "I've been ready for this. We've got the evidence, and the truth is on our side." But now, even with her resolve hardening, she couldn't ignore the weight of what she was up against. The reality was sinking in. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about standing tall in the face of a world that didn't want to see someone like her succeed. Amanda was interrupted from her thoughts by the sound of her phone ringing. She glanced at the caller ID. It was Ashley Thompson. "Amanda!" Ashley's voice crackled with fear on the other end of the line. "I've been trying to reach you. It's about the smear campaign." Amanda felt her stomach tighten. "What happened?" "I just saw it online. They've posted personal details about you. They've found old articles, photos, things from your past. They're spreading rumors that you've been involved in criminal activities and that you don't have the legal credentials to handle this case. They're trying to destroy your reputation before the trial even begins." Amanda felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known that this was coming, but hearing it from Ashley made it real. She didn't know what kind of dirt they had dug up, but she had a sinking feeling that it was going to be ruthless. She couldn't afford to let this distract her from the case, but the thought of her name being dragged through the mud made her feel vulnerable, exposed. "I'll look into it, Ashley," Amanda said, her voice calm despite the panic rising inside her. "We knew they'd try to go after me. Don't let it get to you. Just focus on the truth. We have the evidence, and that's what matters." Ashley's voice trembled. "I know, but they're saying all these things about you. What if it works? What if people start believing them?" Amanda closed her eyes, pushing back the wave of doubt threatening to overwhelm her. She couldn't afford to let fear take root. She had to stay focused. "We've come too far to stop now, Ashley. The truth is stronger than any lie they can tell. Trust me." After the call ended, Amanda stood motionless in the center of her office, grappling with the realization that the attack wasn't just against her. This was an assault on everything she stood for. Brown Enterprises wasn't just trying to win a case. They were trying to destroy her, to erase her as a threat. And they had no intention of stopping until they succeeded. That evening, as Amanda prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. The media onslaught had already begun. She had seen the first few articles, the first few comments. They were relentless. Her past had been scrutinized, twisted, and distorted. There were articles claiming she had used connections to get into law school, others suggesting she had been involved in questionable legal practices before starting her own firm. They were starting to build a narrative around her that didn't reflect the truth, and it was spreading quickly. But Amanda was not about to let them win. The following morning, she woke early, determined to fight back with everything she had. She started by calling a trusted PR contact who had helped with her previous cases. Together, they would launch a campaign to discredit the false claims being spread about her. She needed to act quickly, to neutralize the attacks before they had time to take root. She drafted a statement, outlining her background and career achievements. addressing the accusations head-on without sounding defensive. She didn't need to justify herself. She just needed to present the truth in a way that was unassailable. She also requested a public apology from the outlets that had published the defamatory content, making it clear that they had acted irresponsibly without verifying the information. It was a risk. Attacking the media would invite even more scrutiny, but Amanda was used to being the underdog. It was the only option. Meanwhile, her team was busy organizing a press conference. Amanda decided that she wouldn't hide from the media storm. Instead, she would confront it directly. She scheduled the conference for the following day, knowing it would be her chance to regain control of the narrative. The press conference was scheduled in the afternoon. Amanda walked into the small conference room of her office building, facing a crowd of reporters, cameras flashing, microphones held out in front of her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, but she stood tall, her back straight and her expression resolute. She began by addressing the media with a calm, steady voice. "Good afternoon. I've called this press conference to address the smear campaign that has been launched against me in recent days by Brown Enterprises and their associates." She paused for a moment, looking around the room, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I understand that in our current political and social climate, stories like mine can easily be twisted, distorted, and weaponized. But I'm here to tell you the truth. I've been practicing law for almost a decade, and I have fought for the rights of countless individuals. I've done so with integrity, dedication, and respect for the law. The accusations made against me are not only false, but they are an attempt to silence me, to silence the very people I represent. They are an attempt to discredit the work that I've done, and the work that I will continue to do." She let the room absorb her words. "I am not intimidated, and I am not backing down." Amanda could feel the strength in her voice, the conviction in her heart. This wasn't just about defending herself. This was about the very fight she had taken on, about standing up to those who believed they could destroy someone simply because they had the power to do so. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a symbol, and no smear campaign would take that from her. The next few days were a whirlwind. Amanda's response had been a game changer. Public opinion had already begun to shift. The press conference, coupled with the press release and her firm's transparent handling of the situation, began to win back the trust of those who had been unsure. But there was still one more hurdle to overcome: the court battle itself. Michael Brown was a powerful adversary, and he wasn't going to give up easily. Amanda knew that the real fight would begin in the courtroom. The courtroom was a cavernous space, the kind where the sound of footsteps echoed in silence and every word spoken could be amplified tenfold. Amanda stepped into it with her head held high, her heart pounding in her chest, but her face an impassive mask. She had spent countless hours preparing for this moment. Every document had been reviewed, every witness prepped, every possible scenario anticipated. This was the final stage of the battle. Everything had led to this moment. The case against Michael Brown and his company, Brown Enterprises, had already been through weeks of public scrutiny, but now it was all coming down to the evidence. Amanda had gone through every angle: labor violations, wage theft, systemic discrimination. The documents Ashley Thompson had provided, the testimony from other employees, and the public revelations about Brown's connection to corrupt local officials. It all pointed to one undeniable truth. Brown Enterprises had systematically abused their power to exploit workers, and Amanda was here to ensure that they would be held accountable. She glanced at Ashley Thompson, who sat beside her at the plaintiff's table. The young woman's face was pale, but her eyes were filled with resolve. This was her chance to see justice done, not just for herself, but for the countless others who had been victimized by Brown's corporation. Amanda turned to face the opposing side. Michael Brown, the CEO of Brown Enterprises, sat at the defense table with his high-powered legal team. They were all poised, confident, their eyes scanning the room, perhaps even considering how they would twist the facts in their favor. Brown himself sat with a smug expression, his expensive suit fitting him perfectly. He was a man who believed his wealth and influence could buy his way out of anything. But today, Amanda was going to prove him wrong. The judge entered, and the courtroom fell silent. Judge Diana Monroe was known for her no-nonsense approach and her firm stance on corporate accountability. Amanda had been preparing for this moment for weeks, and now it was time to present her case. "Ms. Harris," Judge Monroe's voice broke through the silence. "You may begin." Amanda stood, adjusting the collar of her blazer and walking to the podium. The weight of the room pressed against her, but she steadied herself. This was it, the culmination of everything she had worked for. She looked out over the room, her gaze briefly meeting Ashley's before she turned her attention back to the judge. "Your Honor," Amanda began, her voice calm and measured, This case is not just about one company's violations of the law. It is about the abuse of power, the exploitation of workers, and the systemic discrimination that has been allowed to thrive in our society. Brown Enterprises, led by Michael Brown, has been operating with complete disregard for the rights of its employees. They have targeted vulnerable individuals, paying them less, denying them opportunities, and treating them as expendable. These actions are not isolated incidents, Your Honor. They are a pattern of behavior, a culture that permeates this company. Amanda paused, making sure her words had the desired impact. She could see the jury listening intently, some of them nodding in agreement, others looking at her with the intense scrutiny that only a courtroom could provide. We are here today because of one courageous woman, Ashley Thompson, who had the strength to stand up and speak out against the injustice she witnessed firsthand. She risked everything, her job, her career, her livelihood, to bring this to light. And she is not alone. There are many others like her, employees who were exploited and silenced for too long. She turned to the jury, allowing the weight of her words to sink in. Your Honor, the evidence we have presented in this case, emails, memos, witness testimonies, clearly show that Brown Enterprises has systematically violated labor laws, discriminated against employees, and perpetuated a toxic work environment. This is not just a case of a few bad apples. This is the culture of a company that has been built on exploitation, and it must be held accountable. Amanda turned back to the judge, confident but not arrogant. We are not just asking for compensation for the victims. We are asking for justice. We are asking for a ruling that sends a clear message that no one, no matter how wealthy or powerful, is above the law. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. The room was silent as Amanda finished her opening statement, the words hanging in the air. She returned to her seat, feeling the eyes of the jury upon her. She had made her case, and now it was time for the evidence to speak for itself. The trial proceeded with the defense's opening statement. Michael Brown's legal team, led by one of the most well-known corporate lawyers in the country, was as polished as Amanda had expected. The lawyer spoke smoothly, his words designed to discredit Ashley and paint her as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta. He minimized the significance of the documents Amanda had presented, claiming they were taken out of context or exaggerated. But Amanda wasn't intimidated. She had anticipated this. She had spent days preparing Ashley for what was coming, rehearsing answers to every possible question the defense might ask. They would try to undermine her character, but Ashley's testimony was powerful. She spoke of the discrimination she had witnessed, the countless emails where employees were told to keep quiet or fall in line if they wanted to keep their jobs. She spoke of the moments she had seen colleagues passed over for promotions or harassed because of their race or gender. When it was Ashley's turn to take the stand, she did so with a quiet strength. Amanda could see the courage in her eyes, and she knew Ashley was ready. The jury listened as Ashley recounted the mistreatment she had endured and witnessed, and the defense's attempts to undermine her were weak. They couldn't break her resolve. Over the next few days, Amanda presented more evidence, calling in expert witnesses who testified about the systemic issues within Brown Enterprises and the ways in which the company had been complicit in perpetuating these practices. The evidence was irrefutable, and Amanda could feel the momentum shifting in her favor. Brown Enterprises was on the defensive, and they knew it. But as the trial drew to a close, Michael Brown himself took the stand. Amanda knew this was the moment where everything would either fall into place or unravel completely. Brown's testimony was smooth, his words carefully crafted to sound like the reasonable businessman, the one who had no idea his company was engaged in any wrongdoing. He denied everything, playing the role of the misunderstood corporate leader who was simply trying to run a business. He blamed the bad apples in his company for any issues, claiming that he had no knowledge of the discriminatory practices or wage theft. Amanda's turn to cross-examine him came. She stood up and walked to the podium, her eyes locked on Brown as he sat confidently in the witness chair. Mr. Brown, Amanda began, her voice steady but laced with a hint of challenge. You've claimed that you had no knowledge of the practices we've outlined in this case. But what about the email from your HR director that explicitly mentions how to weed out employees who don't fit the company's culture? What about the performance reviews where employees of color were repeatedly marked as underperformers despite meeting targets? You claim to be unaware of all this, but how do you explain these? Amanda pulled up the evidence, one piece after another, watching as Brown's confidence began to crack. His smug demeanor faltered, and for the first time in the trial, he seemed unsure of himself. The cracks in his story were beginning to show. As she continued her questioning, Amanda could see the shift in the jury's faces. They were starting to see Michael Brown for what he was, a man who had used his power to exploit others and hide behind his wealth when confronted with the truth. When Amanda finished her cross-examination, she knew that the case was all but won. The evidence, the testimonies, and the sheer determination of those who had fought for justice had come together in a way that no corporate lawyer could spin away. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Amanda sat in the courtroom, her heart racing as she waited for the verdict. When the jury finally returned, the foreman stood and addressed the judge. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Brown Enterprises, guilty on all counts." Amanda's breath caught in her throat. The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief and relief. She turned to look at Ashley, whose eyes were filled with tears. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who had been silenced and oppressed. The judge turned to Michael Brown. "You will be held accountable for your actions. This court will determine the damages owed to the plaintiffs." Amanda stepped outside the courthouse, the weight of the day's events finally settling in. She had done it. Against all odds, she had brought down one of the most powerful corporate figures in the city. She had fought for justice, and she had won. But as Amanda walked away from the courthouse, she knew that this was just the beginning. There were more battles to fight, more voices to amplify. Her journey was far from over. But for now, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The fight for justice had been hard, but it had been worth every moment. And for the first time in a long while, Amanda felt a deep sense of pride. She had found her voice, and in doing so, had changed the course of many others' lives as well.